Start recording. But thank you for taking some time and space. I know you're pretty busy right now. ¿Dónde andas con todo ahorita?
So currently I'm actually home. I'm in the Coachella Valley. I'm visiting my parents for the weekend.
Nice. Y I'm guessing you go back on Monday, Sunday.
Yeah, so we might be actually leaving today in the evening.
Oh,
Yeah.
pronto. Bueno,
Yeah.
I want to jump straight into it.
Hmm.
I'm doing a podcast called Café Empatía, Charlas y Platicas, and this is episode 5 with Mariela Magaña. So the whole purpose of this is just to really, and I think you do this from the place where you come from and what you do, but to inspire and to influence and to just show, a positive that there's folks out there in the community doing um, beautiful things. And sometimes we don't get to see those folks because we're so caught up in our own world. So I just want to give you a space to kind of talk about who you are, how you got to where you're at, and what you're currently working on right now. And then eventually get into the conversation of mental health and how that intersects with your personal life, with your professional life, anything that you want to bring light to the conversation of mental health within the community, within the greater society. But you know who if you don't mind taking away the mic, who's Mariela, and what is she up to?
Yeah, so I think I'd like to talk about my roots, like where I come from. So I come from a very strong farm working community. So my great grandparents were part of the Bracero program, and then my grandparents, the four of them were farm workers, and currently my parents are also farm workers. So with that, we come from a very it's an immigrant family, right? We immigrated from Michoacan. So I actually was born in Michoacan, and I immigrated when I was between, I think, 3 or 4 years old.
Hmm.
And so,
Do you remember
you
any of
know,
that?
I don't. I went to school in Michoacan. So
Hmm.
we're from this very small little town called San Pedro, municipio de Porandiro, Michoacan.
Shout out San
And there's,
Pedro.
yeah, and my parents' home in San Pedro is actually across from um, the preschool in the town. And so my mom
Hmm.
always talks about how I actually had a teacher there that I went to. So I think I was there for a full year.
Hmm.
Um, and so I don't remember, the time that I was there in school. I think from the stories that my parents and my family have shared, I think I probably have made up stories of things that I remember, but
Hmm.
I don't think I actually remember specific of the time there. The only one event that I feel like I kind of remember was during Halloween. So my mom ended up doing this like DUI, costumes, and she ended up having my brother be like a what are they called? Momias?
Oh yeah.
And she basically used the toilet paper and she wrapped them around the toilet paper. So I do remember that Tony was
That's funny.
dressed as a mumia, and he didn't want to go inside, and so I remember that very vividly.
Yeah.
But other than that, I don't remember when I was that young. But I do have memories that when I was that young, I would go with my grandma, I would go with my aunts, um, and growing up after the table grape season was over, for many years we would go to Mexico to visit during the
Hmm.
summertime. So those are mainly the main memories that I have of San Pedro, right? Growing
Yeah.
up and going to San Pedro in the summers and spending time with cousins there and just like playing and being kids.
Yeah.
Um, but
So then
yeah,
you
so
came over
that's
here when you were 3, 4.
yeah, so I came when I was 3, 4. And so my family, my grandparents own this like um, big mobile home in Thermal, and that kind of became the home where all of us came when we
Mm,
came from Mexico until like our parents or the adults saved enough money to either go to an apartment or to go to another mobile home. So when we came, we ended up staying at the time my grandparents lived there along with other uncles. And
mm,
so we stayed in that trailer for maybe 6, 7 months
yeah,
until my parents raised some money, and then they purchased their own trailer, and we moved to another mobile home park in Thermal. So I really spent most of my, I want to say, childhood years
yeah.
in the mobile home. So I lived in Thermal until before middle school. So I actually started middle school at Toro Canyon. So I
Mm.
don't think people really know that because I was there for a very short amount of time. I
Wow.
ended up being there for maybe like 2 or 3 weeks before they ended up giving my parents the key to our now home in
Mm,
Coachella. And so because of that switch, I ended up going to the CDA for middle school, and then I went to Coachella Valley High School. And, throughout that time, I was very focused on like studying, and my desire to pursue college was always a priority. And my
yeah.
parents, though they had limited understanding of what it would take to get into college or get through college, they pretty much instilled in my siblings and I the importance of pursuing higher education. And so after high school, I went to UCLA. Um, and I want to say I wanted to become a doctor since I was a sixth grade student.
Oh, really?
I think the idea was planted since sixth grade. And so, going into college, wanted to be a doctor. So I knew I had to be like pre-med major, so I ended up being in biology.
Yeah.
Um, as I think first generation students pursuing careers that are very competitive, especially at UCLA, um, I think I definitely initially was homesick. And
Yeah.
then I think the rigor of the courses at one point, I think I might have been depressed, but I was never
Mm,
like diagnosed with depression, or I never like seeked out support. I just
yeah.
remember being like very tired and very sleepy after a long day, and all I would do is sleep.
Mm,
Um, and yeah, so I was at UCLA, was biology major. The way that I ended up overcoming the challenges with schoolwork is I actually worked at a HIV clinic at UCLA. And so that really kind of fed my desire to continue to pursue medicine.
mm,
Graduated UCLA, and unfortunately, I didn't do so well academically. So I had to take extension classes to raise my GPA. So, I kind of have like an untraditional path to medicine in that I didn't go to medical school right after college. I actually had a 6-year gap. So
mm,
during those 6 years, I always knew that my goal was to get into medical school.
yeah.
So everything I did was in a way with that mindset, right? Like, I'm going to do this, but the goal is still to apply to medical school. So throughout those 6 years, I worked as a policy advocate. I worked at UCLA again at that HIV clinic, and then I did some work with Health Career Connections on the summers.
Mhm.
But throughout that whole time, I was taking those extension classes to raise my science GPA. And fast forward, I ended up applying after 6 years. Thankfully, I got in. And now currently I'm in my just finished my third year, so I'm actually going to be a fourth year now. Yeah, so time
Good
definitely
stuff.
flew by.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this will be my last year of med school. Um, and
That's
then after
exciting.
that, yeah, it
Yeah.
definitely is exciting. And then after that, it'll be residency. Um, but I think, I can't um underscore the challenges
Yeah.
that I had to overcome throughout those years. I think each step of the way had its own challenges.
Yeah.
Um, But yeah, I'm glad I'm here to share some of those things and how mental health is definitely something that is very important.
Yeah.
When you have this goal for yourself that seems so far away and so out of reach, but you need to consistently remind yourself that today I'm going to focus on what I could do today.
Mm,
And, little by little, you eventually get to where you want to be. And then I
yeah.
think a big um, benefit that I had is that I've always had the unconditional support of my parents, my siblings, and now my husband.
Yeah.
So I think that social support is extremely important
Yeah.
um,
I also
to
feel
not
like,
only,
uh-huh.
yeah.
No, I feel like that it sounds like family like is a really big thing. And I feel like, mi papá siempre decía like siempre va a estar la familia ahí,
Hmm.
and unconditionally. And I feel like that goes a long way, especially when we have these long-term goals like finishing med school. And that support is just it's the unconditional love it's real. So yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Um,
But I did want to touch on I know you mentioned the before going into kind of the different challenges that you overcame and that you faced throughout this journey. I'm curious like what that seed was in terms of when you were in sixth grade. And because I also had a goal too of becoming a doctor when I was in high school. And I remember telling my counselor, Miss Prendez back at CV, like, she asked me what I wanted to be, and I was like, I want to be a doctor. She was like, wow, you're gonna be my first doctor. um but throughout my trajectory, I realized that I didn't want to go into medicine, and that route wasn't for me.
mhm,
So I guess like for yourself looking back then, how was that seed planted, and how did you nourish it? uh
mhm,
you know be, because it's when we think about goals like that, and they feel so long, it can feel intimidating, and it can feel a bit too long. And so sometimes we don't have the perspective or the mindset to think long term like that, and sacrifice what we're doing in the moment. So
mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, so I had a really good sixth grade teacher. So at the time I was at John Kelly, so I don't think
Mm,
I mentioned. So when I was in Thermal, the elementary school that I was assigned to was John Kelly. And at the time, I think I was the first class or second class that would only go up to sixth grade. And then after that, we would
mm,
hope to go to like a middle school. And at the time we had periods. And so we would rotate for science, English, math, maybe social studies. And I had a really good science teacher. To this day, I'm still once in a while connected to him, just because of what a big impact he made in my life.
mm,
So he, went above and beyond what I think was expected of him as a science teacher. So his name is Mr. Martinez. He was teaching at John Kelly for some time, and then he was part of the CVUSD board as well for some time, but now I believe he's retired. Um, but anyways, during that time, uh, I think the most important thing is that I remember him telling us
yeah.
that we could accomplish anything we set our minds to.
Mm,
What we had to do is we just needed to work hard and we needed to put in the work.
yeah.
And I think at the time when I was probably like 10 years old.
Mm,
Um, at the time, I was also like helping at church. I think, throughout my life, I think service is something that
mm,
I don't know if it's something I was born with, but I always gravitated to helping people, whether it be at parties, like serving plates and
mm,
taking plates to people. And at the time, I was volunteering at the Therma Church um, as a catechist. So I had just completed my like first communion, and I'm like, oh, I
mm,
want to give back. And so I was like working at the Therma Church with catechism. while at the same time, I was having this teacher who was introducing me to the world of science.
Mm.
And he had us complete like a science project. And I remember I did it on testing like different antibiotics and see like which one was better at eradicating the bacteria. And like we had petri dishes and we grew the
Wow. This is
bacteria.
sixth grade?
Yeah, it's so awesome. And so, we went to the science fair. And then aside from that, he also purchased pig hearts and we dissected pig hearts. We learned
Wow.
anatomy. And then the big, I at the time, I think it was this big prize, right? So
Yeah.
he would select, um, I'm not sure if it was 10 or 12 students out of the whole sixth grade class to go on this science um specific trip to Florida.
Yeah.
And so, for me, like one, I was enjoying the time in the classroom. And then two, like, our parents were always working as farm workers.
Yeah.
We had little to no time to travel outside of the Coachella Valley, let alone go to another state.
Yeah.
Especially because this trip will mean that we would go to Kennedy Space Center, Epcot, Walt Disney World,
Wow.
and we would go to Tampa as well. And so anyways, I was part of the science project. I really enjoyed dissecting the heart and learning about the anatomy. And then I was selected to go on this trip. And so during that trip, we also got the chance to dissect squids. And
Mm.
so all of that, I think, really helped me feed that, I think, passion for medicine, or I guess science at the time. And so during that time, I think the Iraq War was going to happen.
Mm.
And at the time, I wanted to be a soldier, because I was like very involved in
Really?
church. Yeah, I was very involved in church. And so, this 10-year-old wanted to help people. And my idea of helping people was I want to die for people, because that's
Mm.
what Jesus did. And
Wow.
so,
Yeah.
yeah. And so I was like, oh, I think I want to be a soldier because I want to go, fight for people or whatever. And
Sacrifice my life.
obviously, yeah,
Yeah.
sacrifice my life. And at the time, the Iraq War was filmed and we were watching it on TV when it started. I remember doing the countdown, like it came
Wow.
out on TV. And then I started seeing what war was like. And I said, I do not want to be a soldier. And so then I, with that idea of how I want to help people, then I started thinking, well, if I can't die for people, I could help people stay healthy so they don't die.
Mm.
So then that's kind of how this whole desire pursuing medicine started, like that teacher, the church things I was doing, and how I was kind of framing what I was passionate about and the values that I was gonna like kind of take with me throughout life.
Yeah.
Um, so that happened in sixth grade. And so after that, I knew that I had to like study hard. Like I was a good student. I think in elementary school, I probably was more like an average student.
Mm.
But then in middle school and high school, I knew that if I wanted to go to college, like I needed to put in the work. And so that's when I ended up like really caring about my grades and like studying some more. And then in our family, we had several family members who were top of the top 10
In
in the
school.
class, yeah,
Yeah.
in school. So then I was like, okay, I think I want to be top 10. So then I knew I
Mm.
needed to take AP classes, I needed to do all of that. Um, but then I think, like you said, I think once you go into college, you see how hard it is.
Mm.
And I think the reasons why I continued on this path is because I felt like the impact I wanted to do in the community, I would be able to do it as a physician. And so that
Mm.
was actually like the whole idea was redefined um when I was working as a policy advocate and I saw that the community has so many needs
Yeah.
that are not only going to be resolved by policy changes, but by people in the community who are going to help advocate for the needs they have.
Mm.
And when I was working as a policy advocate, I realized that a lot of the political leaders yeah, they were listening to Mariela, but they were gonna listen more to somebody with the, a degree
With the
after their
yeah,
name. Yeah.
yeah.
So I then that's when I saw that what I wanted to do could be done with being a doctor, because then I will have that one-on-one relationship with people,
Mm.
but then I could also do a community impact by doing community work and public policy work. So I think as throughout after college, throughout those 6 years of gap years, um, it really helped me kind of picture what my future could be as a physician.
So I'm curious because you know, I imagine that it's not easy to take that gap year and then have it be 6 years. Um, what was what was your thought process in motivating yourself? Because I feel like in that sense, there's, you get caught up with life, family. Um, I don't know if you came back to the Valley or if you were still living in LA, but you know, what was that thought process? Because I feel like you had to get to a certain point, after you were like, okay, well, maybe I need this title, this label for, so that way these conversations can actually be heard and can actually be implemented within, the community. Uh,
Mm.
did you find yourself, being hard on yourself? uh was there a lot of positive self-talk? What did that look like for you in that process? Because I feel like uh folks who go into these careers like medicine, like law, their trajectory is very linear. And so go finish high school, go to college, either do your master's, go to medical school, and then everything's kind of like laid out for you. So if that's the path you want to follow, um it's there for you. So what did that look like for you?
Yeah, so I would say, I think graduating college was a great accomplish for me, for my family, but at the same time, like, as you were mentioning, it was also, I think, a reality check for me, because I knew that if I wanted to be a doctor, I wasn't ready to apply.
Mm,
So it was gonna take dedication and commitment to taking these extension classes, because I needed when if I were to do these extension classes, like, I had no other option than getting A's.
mm,
So, I knew that I needed to put in the work, and so, at that time, I remember it was hard, I think, to kind of, how they say, kinda swallow that pill of, like, knowing that you have this desire so bad, right? You wanna go to medicine and you can't apply yet because the reality is that you're not gonna get in.
yeah,
And so I think knowing that and then going to, like, advisors and confirming that was hard. Um, and it was hard too because, nobody in my family is a doctor. My parents
yeah,
are not doctors. So a lot of mentors were vital in ensuring that I knew what steps to take.
yeah,
And they also were instrumental to ensure that I believed in myself. Because it's very easy, like you said, there are those individuals who just go straight and
yeah,
they never take a break. Um, but for those of us who do take gap years, I think it's a lot of self-talk, it's a lot of reaching out to mentors, reaching out to like-minded people, people who have the same journey who you could seek out for help. But a lot of it, I think, will definitely be having those people around you who believe in you, so that when you don't believe in yourself, they're there to remind you, like, you're enough. And I
mm,
think throughout my like pre-med journey, like, one of the biggest things that I sometimes find myself reminding myself, which I think is across the board, is like we just need to remember that we are enough.
mm,
That there's these institutions and there's these, like, requirements that need to be met, but a lot of the times they're there, and they're really there to go against people like us,
Yeah.
because a lot of people like us, we don't have money to pay for mentors, right? We don't have the connections. Like, we are definitely at a disadvantage compared to other people who come from more affluent backgrounds. Or, in the future, maybe my kids, if they want to go to med school, it's going to be different
Yeah.
because I've already walked that journey. And so I think that's when I think I had to really focus on, I guess, at the time I didn't really think of it as mental health, but it was mental health, right? It's like, how do I, one, not compare myself to others because I'm in my own
That's a
journey.
hard one. Yeah.
Yeah. And then two, how do we focus on the present while we plan for the future? So it's
Mm.
like knowing that you're gonna get there,
Yeah.
but you need to take step by step. So one of the main, like, biggest, like, kind of mottos or like quotes that people use in medicine is like, it's not a marathon, right?
Yeah.
Like, you need to like go slowly because you're gonna get burned out.
Yeah. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. Yeah. And
Yeah.
do you feel like, I know you said growing up you were involved with church. Do you feel like your own faith had a kind of like a positive influence or a big impact on, the your trajectory? Because sometimes, oh, even though we want something so bad, we just have to accept the moment where we're at and, practice patience and consistency and, like you said, the work ethic. And I feel like a lot of times nos desanimamos because, one of those pillars isn't where it should be. And I feel like, mi mamá siempre my mom's really big into her faith. And so she's like, pues hay que, soltarlo y dejarlo a Dios. And, just kind of like what you're saying, focus on the day and that'll get us to there. So do you feel like your faith in that sense was a pillar in, your journey?
Yeah, I believe so. So, I didn't mention this because I kind of moved fast forward until I got into med school. But when I
Oh,
graduated UCLA, I applied to doing official postbac programs. So those are programs who will help you just take a whole bunch of classes. Like, even it's like grad school. Like, you literally are in school like the whole year and then you raise your GPA.
mm,
So I applied to that. And then I also applied to a program, Health Corps, which
mm,
is a program that it's almost like Teach for America, but this has more like a health lens to it.
yeah.
And so that was initially, a commitment for 2 years. And I kind of just put, my cards everywhere because in a way I was being proactive, right? It's like, okay, I know I need to raise my GPA, but if I don't get that, like, I also want to get this experience and explore maybe public health. And so I applied to all of that. And, I ended up getting into health core. And I ended up living in Oklahoma for a year. And
Oh,
so, yeah, so that honestly, what you were talking about, my kind of retreat for
yeah.
myself was the time that I lived in Oklahoma
Mm,
because I was starting from like a clean slate.
yeah.
I was starting this new opportunity, right? I was working as a health coordinator at a high school um in rural Oklahoma. I didn't know anyone. Um and it really helped me. At the time, I also built a community at church. So
Mm,
I reconnected with church when I was in Oklahoma. And I remember going to um en español se llama Al Santísimo. So
mm,
when the host is in this room and like you just go in there for prayer, like you're in there with the Holy Spirit. And I remember going into the chapel and just being there and just praying and really just talking to God and telling him like, I'm doing this as a way of learning and retesting whether or not I want to do medicine. Because
mm,
I know if I do, it's going to take a lot of commitment and it's going to take time.
yeah.
And I remember going there and I kneeled and I prayed. And we have this saying in our Catholic faith of like, you just have to give it up to God
Hmm.
and he's going to show you. And he has a plan. The plan that he has for you is better than the plan you have for yourself.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the mindset I took. I went to that day, like I prayed and I was there in the chapel and I said, God, I'm here. Let me learn everything that I can doing this, possibly, see if I want to do public health. Um, I know I need to work hard to get into medical school. Um, just show me the way, basically, like if you basically not necessarily giving up my dream of becoming a doctor, but just putting it as a trial, like, is this really what I want to do?
Yeah.
Um, so anyways, I was at Oklahoma. It was a wonderful time. Like Oklahoma's always gonna be that like spiritual home to me.
Yeah.
Just
Have
because
you gone
like
back at all? Or have you been
yeah,
able
I've
to
been
visit?
yeah, I've been twice. So during that time in Oklahoma, I made really good friends. To this day, I still talk to them every like once a month to just check in. It's
Nice.
Sel and Lindsay are still like one of my really good friends. But yeah, I visited twice just to see them. Um, we haven't gone with my husband, but I definitely would want him to come.
Yeah.
There's a lot of fishing, like it's really nice.
Mm,
But yeah, so that kind of was that kind of reconnection with my faith.
yeah.
At the time in Oklahoma, I was also a catechist. So then I started going back to
Mm,
what I used to do when I was younger
yeah.
before going to college. So I ended up doing
Serving
a
others.
yes.
Yeah.
So I ended up doing a year there. You know what's funny? God was showing me that medicine was what I was meant to do, even when I was in Oklahoma and I was just being a catechist. And the reason why I
Mm,
say that is because everybody, like, though I needed to do work, I always would say, but I'm working towards to go, getting into medical school. Like, I want to be a doctor.
mm.
And so, in a way, that was a way of, I think, manifesting to the world, you
100%.
know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I was there, I remember the church was part of the Oklahoma City diocese,
Mm,
and so I got like involved with them, and they were telling me about how a lot of priests had actually been having a lot of heart attacks, and like they were
mm.
not doing well with their health, and um, the coordinator there was like, "Oh, I'm gonna connect you to the diocese nurse. Maybe you could help her come up with ways of how we could help the priest."
Wow.
And so, yeah, and
That's a great
so
connection. I don't think I would have
yeah,
ever thought about that.
yeah, and so I ended up meeting with the nurse of the diocese a couple of times, and then we started like brainstorming ways in which we could help the priest.
Yeah.
And so, like anything, right? There's like rankings, like
Yeah.
there's the leader of the priest and all of that.
Hmm.
So I remember I met with the leader of the priest, who was basically the priest at the church I was going to. And he's like, "How about we start with me? How about we go to the grocery store and you help me pick up food so that I know what to eat."
Mm,
And I remember, I started doing that work with the diocese. And now that we're talking about it, I was like, at the time God was showing me that,
yeah.
my path was to help people be healthy. Even if
Yeah.
I didn't see that at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's an example of ways in which I guess I was doing like health work and stuff. And then an opportunity of work presented itself to come back to the Coachella Valley and be the policy advocate with Leadership Council.
Mm,
And I decided to apply because this whole time, I always talked about, oh, I want to come back to my community and I want to help my
mm,
community. And at the time, I was like, well, I don't really know if I want to do that because I've never actually done it. And so I ended up applying, was a policy advocate. I really enjoyed it.
yeah.
And that I think confirmed
Mm,
the impact I want to do is through medicine. And through medicine, I'm going to be able to continue to do these other things that I like, which is advocating, which is preventative health, which is a combination of public health, public policy. And there's one conversation specifically that I think was instrumental, which was when I was talking with a community organizer at her house. We were waiting
Yeah.
for a community meeting, and she lived in a mobile home park in, like, I think Avenue 70.
Mm.
The condition of her mobile home was really bad. It was like dilapidated and stuff, and I saw her as somebody who was very happy, who
Mm.
her faith was very strong. And I remember having this conversation with her, and I said, you know, what like what is like your motivation to get up every day?
Mm.
Like what how do you measure happiness? And I remember her telling me, like, what makes me happy is knowing that I have the health to wake up every day and work. And so to me, that was like
Powerful.
powerful,
Yeah.
because I'm like, if I could help people be healthy so that they could be the best versions of themselves, so that they could provide for their families, so that they could reach their own potential. Because I've always been of like the thought of everybody has a potential and a mission in life. And sometimes we just need to help them, or like,
Mm.
there's different things that we could do as a society to ensure that people reach that.
Yeah.
And so when she said that, I think everything that I value made sense. And
Mm.
then I was like, okay, I definitely need to become a doctor. And so at the time, I ended up leaving leadership council so that I could do extension classes and work at the same time. But
Mm.
yeah, that's kind of like a long story. But
No.
yeah, there's been multiple things along the path throughout those 6 years that I think reminded me of, yes, like medicine is the route. And
Yeah.
you should, if though it's gonna take time, and most of my 20s were devoted basically to getting into med school.
Mm.
Um, I mean, it's definitely a lot of sacrificing, but
Yeah. So
yeah.
so then looking back now and reflecting on the question that you asked that community organizer, how do you measure happiness now at this point in your life?
Yeah, so I think happiness to me is, obviously I'm married, so is being able to have like a strong marriage, supporting my husband, um, having joy and love, not only from my partner, but also seeing friends and being with family. I think, I was talking to my husband a couple weeks ago that the way that med school is structured is that we go either by blocks, by like 3 months,
Hmm.
or by month. So during third year, we do clinical rotations that take about a month. And so at the end of the month, we have a test. And so what I do to fill my cup, connecting to friends, is that the day I have that exam, like couple hours after, I'm texting everyone. It's like, how are you doing? Like, cause sometimes when you are in the grind,
Yeah.
you're just so focused on surviving. Like you
Yeah.
just want to survive the week, you just want to survive the
Yeah.
exam. And so once the exam is over, it's like, okay, I need to catch up with people. Like I need to know what people are up to. Like that fills my cup, and that makes me happy
Mm.
knowing that I'm connected to my friends, that I come visit family. For us, it's always been important to show up for like birthday parties. So we do
Yeah.
have nieces and nephews. So it's always important, even if we got to the party late, like
Yeah.
just being able to
You still
see
showed up.
family has been
Yeah.
important. Yeah. And then for like, I guess my own personal kind of um self-care is like going out to nature. So currently we've been doing a lot of like nature walks in the evenings.
Mm.
Thankfully, we live in a community that's green, and
Yeah.
so we don't have to necessarily drive somewhere. So we could just go out after dinner and go on walks. We try to eat healthy, we try to cook in. So,
Yeah.
food is definitely something that
I,
makes me happy.
yeah. No. On the I'm,
Yeah.
I'm I'm the same way. Uh,
Yeah.
I have two I guess two questions for you. Uh, I know you said, there was a sense of curiosity and interest when you were younger, and looking back now and feeling that medicine has always been at the forefront of this journey for you, whether it was conscious or unconscious. Um, do you still feel that sense of curiosity and passion now in what you're doing, now that you're in med school, now that you're going to finish med school, um just because you know I see it all the time within different professionals is people burn out, and because of that, because they care so much and because they want to give, it all to their work. And uh do you still feel that same curiosity or that same passion? And how do you give yourself the space to reflect back on that and remember your why, especially moving forward, and now that you're going to start this next chapter after med school, um, and then w- coming back to the valley and working in as a policy advocate, what were the things that you saw within your own community that you know uh, that you saw in terms of gaps or needs, that where you said, I can go ahead and be this person either for these people or these folks who are struggling with these things? um so whichever question you want to touch on first, but yeah.
Yeah. So, I would say the first 2 years of the first year of medical school was hard. Because it was really about just learning the language of medicine, like just memorizing.
Mm,
And we had a test every 2 weeks. Um, it was rough. And I think that's another time when I think my mental health was challenged
mm,
because I was away from home. At the time, I decided to live by myself because at the time it seemed like a great idea because I don't have to worry about roommates who don't clean. And I'm just, I'm by myself. I could study in the apartment. So I would say I think that first year was hard to find that passion and desire to study because it was just memorizing,
yeah.
and then we didn't have any clinical experiences during first year. And then second year was better because we at least would go to clinic once a week,
Mm,
which was a good way of starting to see patients and starting to see the connection of the language that we were learning of medicine and actually being able to see it in action by being able to see patients, treating patients. And then third year, I would say that's when I think third year this far has been the best year because
yeah.
I've been in clinic 8 to 5, 5 days out of the week.
Mm,
Um, and so I think now what drives me, I guess my passions
yeah.
is um is I think a combination of preventative health
Mm,
and access to health.
mm,
Specifically, and I'm still very much about like I want to come to the Coachella Valley. Like everybody who knows me, all my classmates know that. Like Mariela is going to the Coachella Valley because I always say it
yeah.
because I truly mean it, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And so during med school, especially during my third year, um, then I ended up like seeking out opportunities
Mm,
that will align with my passions, right, of preventative health and access to health. And so this year, I've collaborated with the Desert Healthcare District and conducting a research project to assess what are the needs of the soon to be retired farm worker population. Because as we
mm,
know, a lot of the people who are now farm workers are going to be retiring in the next 10 years.
yeah.
And the reality is that our local health system is not ready for them
Yeah.
in the sense that a lot of them don't really go to the doctor frequently. And when they do, unfortunately, a lot of them might have a lot of chronic diseases
Yeah.
that are going to have some sort of coordinated care management. And so I think a part of me um, I think with my years of policy advocating, it has helped me have um, the courage to seek out opportunities that are not necessarily there.
Yeah.
So I had reached out to Dr. Conrado Barzaga at the time. He was with Desert Healthcare District, and I just emailed him and told him, "Hey, I'm a medical student. I'm from the Coachella Valley. Like, this is my research project idea. Like, is this something that you all could fund? Is this something that you guys are willing to collaborate with?" thankfully, he believed in the project, he believed in me, everything worked out.
Yeah.
And then currently, now that that project is over, is seeking other research opportunities in the community. So there's another researcher that works primarily in the Imperial County, Dr.
Yeah.
Lopez. He works from the San Diego State University, and he's doing a lot of women's health research,
Mm,
research on the heat and the impacts in farm workers. So a lot of my passions end up being with like farm workers, women's health. And so a part of me, I think, interest in learning is doing community research
mm,
and trying to figure out ways in which we can improve the local health system
yeah.
in response to those needs that are in the community.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so that's kind of what I've been doing during this past year.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
That's a lot. That's pretty cool. I don't think I've thought about that, what you're talking about. The farm working population and what that's gonna look like in the next 10 years. And I feel like what you're touching on, and I still feel like it's not only access, but also normalizing and destigmatizing this notion of what going to the doctor looks like. Right now, I'm currently working as a community health worker, and so out here in the valley, and I'm so grateful that that's what I was doing in LA when you connected me with Anselmo. And I just want to shout out Mariela because she's also been a big support for me. Uh, she just to put it plain and simple, mi papa really admired you and always talked about you. And so I always saw that as a positive role model. And so, you were foundational in my transition into moving back to LA. And I always think about what mi papa, how he talked about you. And, I hold that in my heart. And that's why I wanted you here today, because you are really an inspiration, and especially as like a Latina in the medical field. And
You're gonna
over,
make me cry.
I say it from the bottom of my heart, because we don't get moments to acknowledge and give flowers to others. And I could die tomorrow, and you'll never hear what's on my heart. And so, I just want to give you your flowers, because it sounds like there's been a lot of adversity on your journey. And within that, I feel like, you know, that's the whole purpose of being able to just do this podcast, is to show other folks. Because, you know, I knew for myself that my trajectory wasn't going to be linear. Everybody always asked me, what are you going to do? And I always said, I don't know, but I know that I want to help. Like you said, I want to help people, and I want to be in service to others. I don't know what that looks like. And it had to take for me working in a coffee shop to actually realize, wow, I love serving people, and I love bringing the best experience that I can to others. And so, a lot of that overlaps with even doing community health work and bringing the best service to people. And I feel like you can apply that to any role, whether you're a doctor, whether you're a lawyer. Um, so yeah, I just want to acknowledge you, and all of that, because you are a role model to me, and to the community. And so, when you talk about these barriers or these things within the farm working population, I see, because people are overworked. You said the system isn't set up for us, and for certain populations. It's even harder when the people who are working within that system, like doctors, like nurses, are so overstressed that they can't even ask the patient how they are, and they get straight into, all right, this is what's wrong with you, this is what you need to do, that's it. And as coming back here, and like I said, I'm super grateful to just come back here and work as a community health worker, is because when I was working in LA, I was doing these workshops on chronic conditions, diabetes, mental health. And as fulfilling as it was, and as happy as I was, there was still a part of me where I was like you said, I can be doing this kind of work back home. But because of the economic circumstances, and the lack of these kinds of positions within the Coachella Valley, I can't do that yet. And so um I want to go I guess I want to go into a question of like, what do you feel like as a doctor, as a physician, um you know, what do you bring to the table in terms of uh you obviously care a lot about the community. What do you feel like doctors can do better in? I'm a big person, a big believer in people being able to empathize and to have compassion and to have patience and understanding and also listen. And I feel like, when we get to these titles, these positions, instead of coming from a place of listening, we come from a place of telling. And sometimes in that relationship, it's very one-sided. And so, you know, sometimes I hear from folks that I feel like the doctor doesn't hear me because all they see is my labs and they don't see me. So I love what you're talking about because, my mom retired a long time ago, but, I think I always think about when I help folks in the community, I'm like, when I help this person, I really put myself in the shoes of put it as helping mi mama, like my grandma, right? And
Mhm.
if this was my grandma, if this was my mama, how am I going to give them the best service so that way I can feel at the end of the day that I did everything that I could and be okay with it and not carry that into my personal life.
Mhm.
Because work is always going to be there and things are always going to need to be done. So
Mhm.
I know there's a lot to that, but I guess you coming to this reflection point and wanting to move forward in all this, as a PC, as a physician, as a doctor, what do you feel like you bring to the table in those circumstances, in those experiences, for the people, for the members, for yourself?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think I want to start by saying that because my journey took, a couple more years than it would take for other people, I think what's important, which is hard for some specialties and some doctors, is to realize that I am Mariela before I was Dr. Magaña. So the essence of who I am is beyond my title as a doctor. And my life should not be being Dr. Magaña. It should be Mariela. And the way that we divide that percentage, it should be more being ourselves than, not that being doctors is not ourselves, but like that's more like a job.
The
You know what I
profession.
mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a profession. That's not your identity. And a lot of the times, because of how hard we work, because of how much the system works us, it's very hard to differentiate between who is Mariela and who is Dr. Magaña. And so I
Mm,
think for me, um, the first thing is realizing that there's more to my life than just being Dr. Magaña.
mm,
And that is what makes me happy. Yes, the profession will bring joy, but at the end of the day, it's a job.
yeah.
And who I am as a sister, as a daughter, as a wife, hopefully in the future as a mom,
Yeah.
that is where the most of the joys come from. Yes, being able to help patients with their health and doing all those things. Yes, it's gonna be like the cherry on top of the ice cream, but that's not gonna be the whole ice cream, if that
Yeah.
makes any sense.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of the way that I'm approaching it.
Yeah.
Because burnout is real.
Mm-hmm.
As I was doing my clinical rotations, um, the system now with the electronic medical system, like a lot of the
Mm,
time we spend more in taking notes and writing our notes and doing prescriptions and answering the inbox than actually seeing and speaking with patients.
yeah.
And so the idea of why a lot of us go into medicine in actuality does not align because we're
Mm,
spending more time doing administrative things than actually seeing patients.
yeah.
So I think that also makes it hard. Um, Depending like where you work, um, there's more flexibility to actually take time and eat.
Yeah.
Um, you know, an inpatient, outpatient. I saw it in both scenarios where it was like we like waited to go to the restroom until like we needed to go to the restroom, you know? Um, and we, some of us are better about meal prepping. So like we brought our food and we just heat it up, and other people would just buy food, whatever it's in the cafeteria, or would just buy a sandwich. So there's I think because of how much the system works us, it almost makes it impossible to be able to take care of yourself. Like
Mm,
go to the doctor, eating healthy, exercising. But then throughout these months, I saw doctors who found a way of making it work for them.
mm,
I was doing my psych rotation, and Dr. John would go on a run during lunchtime. He had his routine. He had those like wipes that you take for like camping.
yeah.
So like he would go on like a 5 mile run during
Dang.
lunchtime, and he already had his routine. It hit 12, like he's ready to go. He
Yeah.
goes to the restroom, changes, goes for a run, comes back, cleans up, starts, eats a little bit, and then he
Yeah.
sees his patient. But I really admired that of him because I felt like in that moment, he put himself first. He realized that, hey, in order for me to show up and give my 100% to my patients, I need to do this
Yeah.
and I need to make it happen. And so I think a lot of it is I'm just starting.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of it is going to be like really like being in tone with myself and really identifying what are those things that I need to do,
Yeah.
right? That are gonna help me stay true to myself, that is gonna help me be happy, that is gonna help me um be the best Doctora Magaña, right? And then there's other doctors who will go to the gym before, they have the funds to have like a trainer. So they talk about going to their trainer in the morning.
Mm,
And then some people just have more money, so then they'll have their food delivered and it's healthy food.
mm,
I think different people find different ways, but I think at the end of the day is reminding that you're not a robot,
yeah.
that you're a human.
Yeah.
And medicine could be also very emotional. Some patients have died during my rotation. So it's like sometimes you don't have the time to actually sit with that and process it because
Yeah.
you have to go see the other patient.
Hmm.
So it's being able to have someone that you go home to and talk to about, because
Yeah.
sometimes the workspace does not allow you to sit when things like that happen.
Yeah.
But in the same way that it took a village to get me into med school and to get through med school, it's gonna take a village to conserve Mariela throughout, the next years, because
Yeah.
it's gonna, like I've told my husband, like if because I am a very passionate person, it's gonna be easy for me to overcome it, right?
Mm,
Especially when I'm a doctor and then people see that I have like work experience before, and I could be an expert on such topics, and it's like, oh, Mariela, can you do this, that, and this? It's gonna be important that also those around me, if they start seeing that I'm overstretched and I'm not showing up for the things that I value most, it's going to be important that those people close to me tell me.
remind you. Yeah.
Yes, remind me that, yes, we're very proud of who you are as Dr. Magaña, but you are Mariela first.
Mm. I appreciate that. I really appreciate that because I feel like where you're coming from, I feel like is a place of self-awareness, and to be able to just practice that self-awareness for yourself and be in tune with how you're feeling, what you're thinking. But like you said, you're so caught up with everything that you're on the go, go, go. And then, other people have lives after work, and then, they're on the go, go, go after that. So
Mhm.
before you know it, it's been 3 months and you're having pain in your shoulder, and you're like, why am I having pain in my shoulder? And like, oh, it's because I've been on the go so much that I haven't really taken a step back to just listen to my body, or so I feel like
Mhm.
that's a really big one. And then going back to what you were just I tell folks, even therapists need therapists, right? And that that concept is also applicable to anything. A doctor needs a therapist, lawyers need therapists, and but I feel like sometimes we just get so inflated by our own ego, or our it's hard to practice that humility and actually take a step
Mhm.
back and say, I need help, right?
Mhm.
So I love that, and it does require a level of assertive communication to those around you, so that way people can bring you back, because you're right, as
Mhm.
passionate folks about things that you're passionate about, it's easy to just kind of invest yourself and keep going, and sometimes that line of Dr. Magaña versus Mariela is blurred. So I
Mhm.
love just how you said that, and I think that's a really good segue into going into this idea of mental health. And I know you said you touched on it, how you experienced it. You said was it your first year of college at UCLA, and
Mhm.
then also uh your first year at med school.
Mhm.
And I guess I just want to ask, one, how, I mean, go looking back at the first time versus the second time you felt it. Um, you know, I feel like you're self-aware enough to realize, oh wow, like I felt this before. This is happening again.
Mhm.
What uplifted you in those moments? Because it's really easy to just go into your shell, and just for just to share with you, my last year of college, I was in my last year of college, my last semester. I had taken an extra one, so I had walked, and then I took an extra semester in the fall. And at the end of that semester, people always kept asking me, like, what are you going to do after college? What is it that you're going to be? How are you going to apply your degree? And for a week, maybe towards the ending of the semester, before finals week, um, I couldn't get out of bed. Like I stayed in bed all week, and at the time I had a partner. I didn't tell her anything. Uh, didn't shower. I would order Uber Eats and then just have it pulled up to my door, go downstairs, get my food, go back into bed. And the only person that was aware of that was my roommate, because he saw me every day come. So um I really, and that friend, his name is Kevin, and I really appreciate him, because he would talk to me and he would take me out of that hole that I felt like I was in. And I'm an overthinker. It's a blessing and a curse, but I'm an overthinker, and at that point of my life, I was just overthinking way too much, and my body, my everything just felt so overwhelmed. And so I'm
Mhm.
I'm so thankful that the universe, God placed them in my life at that point in time, because he was able to just and I don't even think he knows this, but he really got me out of that rut. And so I'm curious, like, what what did that look like for you? um and i I would push to say, like, it should be normalized to actually talk about these things, because it is real. And I don't think we're aware of it until we're actually feeling that sense of overwhelmness, or those feelings of low energy. um yeah, and I feel like, what did you learn from that moving forward? Like, did that make you more open to talking to folks, to seeing a therapist, to just getting support for yourself?
Mhm. So I would say like at UCLA, at the time I was living with my, till now like really good friends, Liz and Dulce. And I think that the the low energy that I was experiencing then was I was taking too many classes a quarter. So like I
Mm.
was stretching myself too thin. And at the time, I, as we sometimes see with like people coming from, for example, CV high school and then going to UCLA, like we aren't very much taught the importance of like how do we manage or how do we study, right? So I
Yeah.
think that's kind of the main cause of why I started
Mm.
feeling kind of overwhelmed. And then at the way that I coped with having that sentiment was working more hours
Oh
at the
wow.
HIV clinic. So I was like overstretching myself, and like I knew that I needed to do something that was going to fill my cup, and that cup was working at the HIV clinic and doing what I know, which is like helping others and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, like, yes, it was in a way helping me get through this hard time, but it was hindering my ability to do well in my classes because now I don't have enough time to study. And the time that I did study, like I was tired because I was overworked, and I would sleep, right?
Yeah.
Like I would get to the apartment and then I would just eat and then I would sleep. Um and then, so what ended up happening is I ended up going to a conference, and it was the MedPep conference. I think it was either the first
Mm,
or second conference. And then that's when I met the first person I reached out was Seda Greenwood. And, I basically just asked, like, I really enjoyed the conference. Like, is there a way where I could be connected with you all? And then that's when I started connecting with MedPep. They, really focused on time management, study skills, goal setting. So I feel like MedPep was very
mm,
instrumental to throughout those 6 years, right? Because I had gone through that program, and there was people in that program um, who were part of like the UCLA School of Medicine admissions committee, and so
mm.
like they really like ensure that we knew that we could become doctors. And
Yeah.
so that kind of helped me during UCLA time, being part of MedPeb, and trying to learn the best ways that I learned and staying focused and doing time management. And then for the first year of med school, I think I started um, working more on like coping mechanisms. So like I ended
Mm,
up like taking more like self-care. So like I would go to the gym. And then, at the time, um, which was good and bad at the same time. I mean, it didn't end up hindering me, but like I was also planning my wedding.
mm,
So, that was something else that I think also helped to kind of just get out of that kind of feeling tired and feeling sad. And then the school provided an app where we could talk to someone. I actually did had like a handful of sessions with this virtual like therapist to just talk about how I was feeling. And then, sometimes I really believe God provides. And so a mentor from another program I was part of, Mi Mentor,
mm.
she connected me with this like coaching program at Kaiser Permanente, where
Yeah.
they were training their physicians to be coaches.
Mm,
And they were recruiting participants to be part of that. And so I ended up being part of that. So technically, I was being coached by a doctor. And so I would talk to her about all these thoughts I was having of you know, um, how I was feeling at the time, and like having, I guess, um, semi coach
yeah.
uh, sessions helped me talk through some of the thoughts that I was having, because I could
Mm,
also just think a lot and not just go on a tangent.
yeah.
So
Do you struggle sometimes, or do you find yourself struggling to verbalize or communicate those thoughts to the people around you? Or are you somebody that keeps it to yourself? You're like, no.
yeah, so I would say I've gotten better
Yeah.
now. I didn't share this, but when I moved back from Oklahoma, I lived with my parents. And all of us have like childhood traumas and things that we have to work with our parents.
Yeah.
And that's when I actually did have a therapist, because I was
Mm,
just clashing with my dad about different things. And that's when I actively was having like therapy to just talk through it all and just heal from things like that. And um some of the coping mechanisms she shared then helped me then
mm,
through medical school. And now I would say being married and having that partner has been a blessing, because I come home and I talk to him. Like if there's
Mm,
times when I'm feeling down, like I talk to him. I feel like I'm starting to feel a little depressed or, and so I talk it out with him and then we're like, okay, well, let's go on more walks or let's go on a hike.
mm,
So I think having someone, whether it be a therapist, or whether it be someone that you're very close to that you could be your confidant, like you could go
yeah,
there and be true to your feelings and everything. I think it's very important. Um, but yeah, I've seen how there's definitely a stigma still about mental health and seeking out therapists. I would say a lot of providers have talked about mental health. One of my first providers during third year actually shared that he was on this like cycle of like he would go to clinic, he would tired, and then he would drink a lot. And so he
mm,
talked about how he overcome through that, and he's still to this day he's a big advocate on making sure like you take care of your health.
yeah,
Um and there's other providers who have talked about that they have like a therapist that they go to consistently. So yeah, I think that's definitely something that it's more open now, and I think people are talking about it a little bit more. I don't know the statistic, but suicide in medical providers is high,
mm,
and we don't really talk about it.
mm,
Um, so yeah, I think this is definitely something that is important to talk about because you could easily just get lost
yeah,
in the system and like this, the routine of everything you're doing that sometimes makes it hard to do those things that you most enjoy.
yeah.
And so it's very easy for you to just, just not be happy.
Yeah, and I also feel like the it doesn't help when, you're the person that everybody goes to because you know everything, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that's kind of like how I was mentioning earlier, just try, taking being more humble and being able to just take a step back and acknowledge and say I don't know everything and I do need help on this, and what does that look like for me as a professional?
Mm-hmm.
So I do agree to that, and it and I want to be mindful of your time, but um what would you tell folks, who are going through undergrad, who are going through medical school, and are on this path of wanting to be, something in the medical field, whether it be a doctor, PA, nurse, you know, do you have any advice or anything that you would kind of like to share to them? I don't know who's listening right now, but it what worked for you, and what would you remind folks to just keep in mind when they have moments like that, or they're conflicted as to what to do for themselves?
Yeah, so I would say that to don't get discouraged if your path
Mm,
is not linear. There's actually a lot of value when it's not linear because you already have work experience. You have a better understanding about how the medical system works. You're not like blindsided.
yeah,
Um, and a lot of the time you actually have a lot better communication skills with patients. So once you get to clinical rotations, like it's easier to communicate with patients. Um, so I would say don't get discouraged. Um, set MedPep taught us this, set a 5-year plan.
mm,
It could change, but just
yeah,
sit down and really think about what do you need to do to get there and have a plan. And then, go through the plan, 1 month at a time, 1 year at a time, reassess where you're at. And there's no rush to get here. Like there is no rush.
yeah,
There's one lesson that a student gave me when I was a health coordinator. She gave me this. Again, I think God was speaking to me through her.
yeah,
She gave me this coloring like image, and it said, "Your dreams don't have an expiration date." And so just remind yourself that, like, it doesn't matter if it takes a long time. What matters is that you're working towards something that is going to bring meaning to your life. Like, yeah, you could work now and you could get money, but like if that doesn't bring meaning to your life, it's not worth doing it,
Yeah.
right? It's better for you to work on something that's of value to you, and though it's going to come with, you know, a lot of sacrifices, but at the end of the day, it's going to be worth it. And then the other thing is like making sure you know who your support system is, whether
Mm.
it be parents, siblings, friends, people who are going to be there for you unconditionally, especially when you need a break from whatever is it that you're doing.
Yeah.
And then as a first, I know we didn't, there was so much to talk about and we didn't touch on this, but I'm also, the first in my family to go to college, but I'm also the first daughter and the first granddaughter.
Mm.
So all that in itself in the Latino family, um, could be very heavy.
Yeah.
And throughout these years, um, you know, my grandparents have gotten sick. Unfortunately, we lost an uncle to alcoholism due to, mental health
Yeah.
problems. Um, and so when a lot of these things came up, a lot of the times they seeked out support from me, right?
Mm.
And so all I have to say about that is the importance of setting healthy boundaries.
Mm.
And I actually had to sit down with my family, and specifically my parents, and letting them know, like, the Mariela they would always pick up the phone when you needed something is still there, but know that now my schedule is a lot busier. And, depending on what day of the week I could be studying for a test. And there's things that are like I want to help as much as I can, but
Yeah.
right now is not the time for me to do everything again, like I've been
Yeah.
doing so far. And so it was a very emotional conversation to have.
Yeah.
Obviously, my parents understood, and to this day, they've been true to that.
Mm.
Um, Whenever something comes up in the family and my parents feel like that's just gonna cause more stress, like they wait to tell me until um um I'm in a better mindset. Like if I have a test, they won't tell me until after the test.
Yeah.
Um
That's good that they
but
respected that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think definitely setting boundaries is going to be important, especially if you come from a Latino community where family is everything, and sometimes we have a misunderstanding of what family is that sometimes puts family before yourself.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think that, and I think most importantly, like really important to believe in yourself, because if you don't believe in yourself, it's going to be even harder.
Yeah.
You just have to believe in yourself.
That self-belief goes a long way. Yeah, it
Mhm.
does. But I know you said that there's still a lot more to touch on, and I think something I've been telling a lot of the folks I've been interviewing is, I'd love to just bring folks back on, at a later date and, talk a little bit more about what you're doing in your work, specifics, what your goals are in terms of the next 10 years, and, what you're really working towards and what impacts you want to have, because, there's just so much to talk about. And I think within everything, I appreciate you being vulnerable and you sharing your experiences, your path, your everything, everything. I'm a big believer in everything happens for a reason. And so I really appreciate the idea of self-belief, because I feel like in things that I'm building right now in terms of, for Café Empatía, I really envision it to be a holistic wellness center, or a center that provides mental health services, and bringing a coffee shop into that. And so, sometimes it's hard. I tell folks sometimes it's hard to see something that's not there. And, when you're creating, I feel like there's beauty in it, because you never know what's going to come out of it. And there's always room for improvement. So, with that, is there anything, that you want to share, last minute thoughts, anything to, the folks listening, or just something you want to get off your chest?
Mm, I guess it's cheesy, but it's like the sky's the limit. Like you could do anything you set yourself to. It might take longer, but you could accomplish it.
Yeah. Pues ahí está, de la doctora Magaña. Pues I appreciate, being on the podcast, and I hope that folks get a lot of value out of just, what you shared, and your experience, because uh I appreciate the non-traditional route, and sometimes we have to hear these kinds of stories and see these kinds of people doing these things to actually remind ourselves that, yeah, I can do it too. So with that, gracias, Mariela, y hasta la próxima vez que nos encontramos. And then I'm gonna go ahead and cut it here, and